This video is my very late preview of the Detroit Lions versus Tampa Bay Bucs matchup in Week 7 in Detroit. This has been a great matchup for 2 years running. The Detroit Lions under Dan Campbell and the Tampa Bay Bucs under Todd Bowles. And Baker Mayfield is surging. They have a ton of talent. Some of it may not play this evening in Detroit, but they seem to, at this point, be personified by Baker Mayfield. He's one of the only quarterbacks in the NFL right now that can really match Jared Goff's statistical impact. Baker's got 12 touchdowns and 1 interception so far this year. Also a career-high 108 quarterback rating. On the other side, Goff, we know, he's leading the league with 14 touchdowns, in fact, and 75% completion percentage. I think almost 76, in fact. He's posted a career-high 120 quarterback rating so far. Both of these teams come in, obviously, with injuries as a major factor, and I'll focus on those first. There won't be any film displayed here, to be honest with you. Previews are, number one, difficult to get out, and number two, typically do not perform well. So for me, the least intensive preparation time for this is to just put out one with audio only and pictures showing. So you're more than welcome to let me know if you don't enjoy those. In any case, Detroit's coming off a 30-17 loss to the Chiefs, right? Their defense gave up 3 passing touchdowns to Patrick Mahomes, I think 260 passing yards almost. And now they're going to be without their entire starting secondary. Brian Branch suspended, Kirby Joseph injured, ruled out, DJ Reed IR, and Terrion Arnold, who was apparently a surprise at practice, I think Friday or maybe Saturday. In any case, those guys are all out. Thankfully, Amik Robertson's been healthy all season. Detroit, as you know, under Dan Campbell, hasn't lost consecutive games that often. And how Campbell and defensive coordinator KELVIN ShepPARD try to navigate all this while facing Baker Mayfield is going to be it's a very tall task, in my opinion. Tampa Bay has injuries on the offensive side that are a factor as well, right? Mike Evans not playing for a month. He was already struggling with efficiency in terms of his catches to targets before then. So maybe Evans wasn't 100% even up through Week 3. Emeka Egbuka, the rookie, has been on fire for Tampa Bay. 27 catches so far, 5 touchdowns, 469 receiving yards through 6 games. He really scorched Seattle's defense in a Week 5 road win. He went 7 for 7 on catches to targets. I was able to watch that game and do some film study videos about it, and Egbuka really was the difference, if you ask me, from a talent standpoint. Now, here's the point there, the comparison point, I think. Seattle was missing Devin Witherspoon, Julian Love, and Reek Woolen actually left that game in the third quarter with a concussion. In my opinion, if Evans and Egbuka can both play and perform to their talent level, with Mayfield, this is a very difficult equation. Perhaps even more so for Detroit than the game last week against Kansas City. The Bucs are on a roll, averaging 27.5 points per game. They've only committed 2 turnovers in 2025. They scored 68 points in the last 2 weeks. For KELVIN ShepPARD, who I think has done a spectacular job for most of this year, this is a demanding game. Even though Chris Godwin out for a while, some type of fibula issue, Bucky Irvin, Tampa Bay's leading rusher, is also out. Rachaad White does have 214 yards on the ground, I think 4 or 5 touchdowns. He's only averaging 4 yards per carry. So the interesting dynamic here is that Detroit has been typically really good against the run in recent seasons. Now, they did give up 112 rushing yards in the loss to the Chiefs, but they've held 4 of the 6 teams they faced so far below 100 yards. I think that will be a good number to limit Tampa Bay's offense to. The return of Aleem McNeil would help, right? When you have the opportunity to roll out McNeil, DJ Reader, and Tyleik Williams in some type of rotation, they're all 3 disruptive. McNeil is a violent and very effective pass rusher as well. That would boost the Lions' ability to possibly get to Baker Mayfield in those obvious passing situations. So how KELVIN ShepPARD mitigates and handles the secondary and what coverages he plays in certain situations, that's going to go a long way towards determining which team gets this win. Tampa Bay is 5-1, and 4 of their wins, however, have been by single digits. I just feel like with this Detroit Lions team, the Lions are not the type of team you can try to hang around with and then come back and bite them late in the fourth quarter. With Jared Goff and all the talent they have on offense, they're going to continue to score. The Bucs' 38-35 win on the road in Seattle kind of follows that formula. Sam Darnold really shredded Tampa Bay's defense, but they were able to come back and win 38-35 basically because Levante David got a critical interception late in the fourth quarter with the score tied at 35. And that turnover aspect is something I want to focus on here. I think it needs to be mentioned or at least talked about. Tampa Bay's only loss came to the Eagles, and they were -2 in turnovers in that game. They've been +2 in each of their latest 3 wins. The 29-27 win over the Jets in Week 3. And then the road win against the Seahawks that I already talked about. And then a 30-19 win, I believe, down in Florida against the 49ers last week. Basically, for the Bucs so far, it seems like when they're +2 turnovers, they're still getting close wins against the Seahawks and the Jets. I don't think you can count on Detroit turning the ball over that consistently. The Bucs defense has been stingy against the run. They're only allowing 88 yards per game on the ground. Somehow, Seattle was able to get to 122 rushing yards, basically on the strength of the tackle-breaking ability of Kenneth Walker III. So far in 2025, right, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, they've combined for over 700 yards. And they've also evenly split 8 touchdowns. That dynamic would help Detroit a ton if the Lions and John Morton could create a bunch of 2nd and 4 situations, basically to give the offense a really wide umbrella of play calls to attack on that second down play over the next 2 or maybe even 3 downs if they go for it. When these teams have faced off before, and like I said in the original lead-in, they've been classic matchups, in my opinion. Even the win for Detroit down in Tampa Bay in 2023, it was a 20-6 differential. The Lions had to work for it, number one. Number two, you had the great touchdown catch by Jamison Williams, as well as they were able to get a win in that game against a stingy Bucs defense without David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Gibbs was inactive that week, and also David Montgomery, I would think, went down with an injury in the second quarter. But in terms of the run-defense matchup, it's been interesting. So early season loss in 2024 for the Lions. They did get 139 rushing yards. That number would be spectacular tonight, in my opinion. That's a winning formula. In the home playoff win late in 2023, I should say in the divisional round actually, 114 rushing yards. You would take that. Down in Tampa Bay, that 20-6 win early in the regular season, I think it was week 6, only 40 rushing yards. Like I said, no Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery got hurt. I think it was the second quarter. So that's a key, if you ask me, is the rushing yard production. One thing that's been consistent is that the Lions have been able to generate yards in this matchup. 463 yards in the loss last season, and then above 380 in both meetings in 2023. So I think Jared Goff and these guys are going to get in the right play call. He's just too smart at seeing what you're lined up in on defense, recognizing it, and then finding something to exploit it. So to me, it really comes down to avoiding turnovers. That looks like a huge coaching point. And Goff's been spectacular so far this year. If there was ever a week where you'd like to see 125, 130 plus, this is it. Because you can count on Goff to give you, at minimum, a 22 of 28 passing effort. If you're able to generate a lot of rushing yards, control the clock, and maybe shorten the game a little bit. If Detroit's able to get to the bye with 5 wins, that would be spectacular. Because you've got road games against Washington, who's really struggling right now, the Eagles, and then the Rams later on in the regular season. I think this is critical for the Lions to try to angle towards that NFC North Division title. You've got the very weird dynamic of the Packers having a tie in their record right now. I'm interested in this matchup against the Bucs from the standpoint of multiple reasons, but one of them is this. Detroit is plus 49 in scoring differential right now. Now, that could be somewhat misleading because 3 of those wins are against the AFC North by a total of 45 points. And the AFC North looks really, subpar if you ask me this season. The Bucs are 5-1, but at just a plus 14 differential. So, again, hanging around with Detroit, expecting Detroit to either A, stop scoring, or B, Goff to commit some abnormal turnover in the fourth quarter, just does not seem like a winning formula to me. I do wonder if this is an 11 personnel game for Detroit or 12 from a John Morton perspective in terms of his game plan, I should say. Sam Laporta is surging. Incredible efficiency. I think 78, 79% catch percentage. He could have a big game here to the boundary. The Bucs are playing Levante David to the boundary some in the games against Seattle. And if he doesn't play, or if he isn't 100%, then that will linebacker situation really becomes tenuous for them. David's a machine, right? I think he's 35 years old. He did practice Saturday. If you recall, in 2023, Laporta's record-setting rookie season, those two had a great battle down in Tampa Bay Week 6. Laporta came into that game with an injured ankle. He just wasn't as efficient in that road win. And David was superb in coverage. That matchup, really not just Laporta against David, but also whoever plays into the boundary as a linebacker. I think it's Servakier Dennis. He's a third-year inside linebacker for them. He's got 40 tackles tied with David. But the Bucs vary their inside linebacker alignments. It's very interesting to watch the film of him. So many other teams are almost 100% dedicated. The Mike to the field and the Will to the boundary. The Lions are, for the most part. Jack Campbell is to the field. Alex Anzalone is to the boundary. The difference in coverage for those two guys is stark. Dennis is very athletic. He's younger and quicker, you would assume, but he's not as smooth or experienced in coverage as David. And I've seen a couple of times where I think he's supposed to cover someone, and he doesn't. So in those obvious third down passing situations, if Dennis is set to the boundary as the Will, and David plays, Levante David plays, and he's to the field as the Mike, I think you've got an interesting matchup, Laporta against Dennis. On earlier downs, however, and this is a little bit of a generalization because I really only have two films of the Bucs. Week 2 against the Texans and week 5 against Seattle, it appears as if David is set to the field more. And so I speculate that maybe Detroit's going to go 12 personnel and find a way to get Laporta into the boundary late. Basically, line up with two tight ends to the field, motion Laporta to the boundary late, get that matchup against Dennis against their base defense. If David either can't play, leaves the game at any point in time, or obviously isn't 100%, then I wonder if the Lions could do it the other way. Line up with two tight ends, one to the boundary, one to the field, and then Laporta to the boundary, motion him to the field, try to get that matchup against David and or a strong safety. I think that might be one of the early things, concepts we see from John Morton and the Lions staff. Very similar to how they got Laporta free against the Bengals, right? 12 personnel, get him on some routes against inside linebackers or an OLB dropping out. The Bucs do have two very good corners, and they certainly so far in 2025 are in a zone delineation often. I'm not refuting that. I do think historically they've been more of a man team in the past, and now data indicates they're playing more zone. I just think that Dean and McCollum have the ability to match up in man, and they're also a team that is not scared of going what's called cowboy, basically sending both corners to the same side. So I wonder, because the pass protection for Goff has been really good, I wonder if you're not going to see some two wide receiver stuff to the field early, meaning St. Brown and Williams to the field early, one or two tight ends into the boundary. Morton, in my opinion, in a limited sample size, seems very adept at coming out in specific personnel groups and formations, I should say, to attack something in the opponent's defense. So I'm wondering what he presents Tampa Bay on those early possessions in the first quarter. And here's what I mean. Let me be specific again. Not showing film obviously makes this a little more difficult, but it's so much ease. It's ease of use for me, or ease of production, I should say, when I can just talk about it. McCollum generally plays to the left for Tampa Bay, and Jamel Dean to the right. So when I talk about 12 personnel twins, what I mean is Williams and St. Brown on one side, and see if McCollum and or Dean travels over. And then you can really get this isolation of Laporta on a strong safety or inside linebacker to the opposite side. I'm thinking back to 2023, but even the games in last year, week 2 or week 3, whenever it was, Ben Johnson tried to attack them in a similar way. And I should mention that St. Brown has 31 catches for I think over 320 yards against Tampa Bay. Those 31 catches, however, have come on 47 targets. So there's been a dip in his efficiency. Well, I say dip. It's just normal catch rate percentage for St. Brown. In week 2 last year, as an illustration, he had 11 catches on 18 targets, right? Still efficient, but 2025 and even last season was off the charts. He finished 2024 with 115 catches, right? And that was 81.6 catch percentage. That's about as much of an outlier as you can have in the NFL for a number one wide receiver. That, first of all, St. Brown led the league in catch percentage, okay? But keep this in mind. The next 13 guys on the list for catch percentage, meaning catches to targets, the next 13 guys, here was their overall catch totals. This is just a sample. 48, 68, 76, 42, 54. The only guys to have above 100 total receptions and a catch percentage of 70% or higher was St. Brown, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Jamar Chase. St. Brown this season in 2025, he's pushed the ceiling even more. He's at an 86.3 catch percentage. It's almost like he's playing a video game on easy mode. 44 catches on 51 targets. That shouldn't be possible. And so Tampa Bay's job, or what they're hoping for, is to make him less efficient. Along with St. Brown, I have some thoughts on the Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery dynamic. I wonder if Morton doesn't go away from the first possession being for one running back, typically Gibbs, and the second possession being for the other, and give more of a rotation. Basically, I think you're moving into predictability territory, and I wonder if Gibbs's yards per carry and also yards per catch isn't down because there's some level of predictability when he's in the game, particularly on the first possession. But this, to me, looks like a game where Morton could attack with 12 personnel stuff. Like I said, very similar to how he gauged the Bengals' reaction a couple of weeks ago. Although it must be said, right, Tampa Bay's defense is very different. Their mindset, their approach with Todd Bowles is drastically different than what you're getting in Cincinnati. The Bucs are physical, very tough and smart and prepared on defense. They're a long way from being anything like the Bengals defense. So I just draw that comparison to talk about the strategy that I think John Morton might deploy. As an aside, the Bucs defense is so interesting to me because of some of the things that they do. Man versus zone, number one. For the Ravens fan base, myself and a content creator named Edgar Allen, we do a show called Inside the Coverage where we focus on the Ravens' coverage choices and what they're doing well, which obviously isn't much in 2025. We picked we picked the wrong season to focus on this. But during the offseason, we want to look at other teams. And the Lions under KELVIN Shepard and then Bucs under Todd Bowles is two of the teams that we would like to get that done for. In any case, I do think this is an uphill task for the Lions defense, but also possibly an uphill task for the Bucs defense at the same time. For KELVIN Shepard to be going out there without his entire starting DB group from week 1, even though Meek, had already been informed that he was going to get outside cornerback reps. At some point in time when Terrion Arnold was still healthy, Detroit had to go out and sign Kendall Fuller, who's an experienced, versatile, and balanced outside corner. I don't think he's really a great tackler, to be honest with you, but at least it gives them some options on the outside with Robertson and Rock Ya-Sin. I do think that Kendall Fuller has a better coverage ceiling and floor than Rock Ya-Sin, and that's based on film from previous seasons and this year. When you're talking about Branch and Joseph both being out, it's pretty ridiculous. Kirby's been dealing with an injury all season, right? But he's still got 3 interceptions, 4 PDs.Maybe his tackles are down, maybe slightly less involved there. But I think I saw a stat leading up to the Chiefs game that in games where Kirby Joseph gets an interception, the Lions are like 16-0, something like that. So to be missing him and Branch, who's a great tackler, great in coverage, also an enforcer because of his physicality, that's a difficult situation for Shepard to try to deal with. I do think he can rely on the inside linebacker position. Jack Campbell is playing, in my opinion, fantastic football in 2025, as good as it gets. He's got 56 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 3 TFLs through 6 games. He's been very active, physical, great in coverage, and hostile on impact as well. I think Jack Campbell is playing about as well as a Mike at the Mike position as anyone I get the chance to watch. The only guy that I would mention or put there would be Ernest Jones IV. But Campbell's been in charge against the run. Alex Anzalone, the will linebacker, typically set to the boundary, still playing extremely well in my opinion. That'll be a place, Anzalone, where the Lions need shutdown coverage, the boundary. And I expect Tampa Bay to go 11 personnel and put their tight end into the boundary. I do like to talk about strategies, and personnel/formation is where I think that conversation leads you, or it should. Campbell, Anzalone, and Derek Barnes, I expect them to be on the field a lot together. And so the decisions that Tampa Bay has to make first, pregame, Egbuka and Evans, do they play? So if they don't, that limits the Bucs' options, meaning if those guys are on the field, it would make sense, in my opinion, for Tampa Bay to go more 11 personnel. Given Detroit's, obviously thin secondary, you really got negative depth for this game. They had to sign a guy like Fuller. I think that Tampa Bay would want to, if they have Egbuka and Evans, go 11 personnel and get as many of the DBs on the field, right, for the Lions to force as many irregular or abnormal coverage situations. And so when I say that the tight end being set to the boundary in 11 personnel is going to be a huge matchup, that's going to be against Anzalone. And Detroit's one of the few teams that is willing to set their inside linebacker, their will linebacker, I should say, Anzalone, in obvious man-to-man against a tight end and just deal with it. So let's do it if Egbuka and Evans both play. I think Evans, if he's close to full health or completely healthy, is a difficult matchup for the corners that Detroit's going to put on the field here. The option, I guess, that could make sense for Sheppard is to play Fuller and Yasin at outside corner and then Robertson as the nickel. Robertson could theoretically match up with Egbuka. You could do it the other way around. Robertson on the outside, Yasin as a nickel. I just don't think that Fuller is a slot defender, particularly against the run. The corner depth is paper thin with DJ Reed and Terrion Arnold being out. I hope that Detroit can stop the run and slow it down, right? Enough to put the Bucs in predictable situations. Maybe they get one of the linebackers off the field and go. I don't know how you go dime, to be honest with you. And really, the way they deploy Anzalone, he in effect is a dime linebacker in those obvious passing situations. Detroit's been able to get 9 turnovers so far. Man, getting 1 or 2 here would be spectacular. It would really create a downhill situation for the whole team. They got 3 turnovers each against the Browns and the Bengals. Now, like I said, those are drastically different offenses than you'll face with a Baker Mayfield-led Tampa Bay Bucs offense. It would help a lot as well if Aiden Hutchinson, Al-Qadim Muhammad, or maybe even Ali McNeil could get after the quarterback. Aiden Hutchinson's on a roll. He's had 3 sacks negated by penalty. A lot of that is related to the man coverage schemes that Sheppard and the Lions play. The Lions need, I think, some type of defensive spark here, maybe even early, to counter the energy and the execution that Baker Mayfield is going to bring to Detroit. You got a real setup possible for a classic duel between Goff and Mayfield, right? 2 former number 1 picks. I think they were separated by 2 or maybe 3 years. Even though I really do not like I don't like doubleheaders on Monday Night Football. At least this one takes off early, and hopefully I can get a good reaction video out for you guys. I think that this game hinges on what personnel groups each offensive coordinator, wants to and can deploy in the case of the Bucs. And then on the other side for the Lions defensively, what personnel KELVIN Sheppard is comfortable putting on the field in obvious passing situations. First, Detroit has to get Tampa Bay there. Whether Bucky Irvin plays or not, and he's ruled out, they've got to stop or slow down the run game first and foremost, and then try to deal with what Baker Mayfield brings. Again, 12 touchdowns, 1 interception, scrambling like a bat out of hell as well. He's got a career-high 108 quarterback rating, as I mentioned earlier. This is a great matchup, to be honest with you. I wish I could have got this preview out earlier and or possibly given you guys some film to look over. My apologies for that. You're more than welcome to let me know if you don't enjoy the previews that are audio only. In any case, this is my one and only preview of the Lions-Bucs matchup in Week 7, a win that I think will be critical for Detroit moving forward after the bye. Appreciate you guys' time.